Welcome to the Author's Cut. I'm Tabitha Lord from Book Club Babble, and today I am so pleased to welcome Annabelle McCormack. And Annabelle just released today, in fact, her debut fiction novel, Windswept. And I read it and I loved it, and it's going on my favorites for the year, best of 2021. Just so you know, I'm telling you ahead of time. It was really fantastic. So today I want to talk to Annabelle about her process, the story itself, a little bit about writing while mom. And disclaimer, Annabelle also writes for the Ink It Writers blog, which I am the managing editor for. So I know a little bit about her. So I have some questions, stashed away that I know I can get her to talk about. So anyway, welcome, Annabelle, and congratulations on releasing your book today. How does it feel?
Thank you. It's very exciting. It's a little bit overwhelming. I mean, it's kind of like all the emotions as opposed to just being, oh, I'm so excited. It's also like, oh my gosh, now people are going to read my book.
Yes. Yes, they are. And they're going to love it. So that's
yeah, hopefully. So, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's very exciting. And it's definitely been something I've been working toward for a really long time. So,
yeah. So talk a little bit about that. I think, when people think about writing a novel, either they imagine that it takes a few months and it's finished, or they imagine it takes 20 years before you get it off. And the truth is usually somewhere in between. So
right.
For you had the idea for a long time, but let's go from start to finish. When you really sat down to get it done, about how long did it take you to draft?
Yeah, so I mean, the initial idea came to me about 20 years ago, but that was really more the characters, and it took me a long time to find the right story for them. And that was probably about in 2013 that I really, really started. So now it's 2021. So they really started kind of chipping away at the setting and the place and all that other stuff. So I figured that out, but then I just went through so many rewrites,
As it happens, yes.
So, my plot that I developed in 2013 changed drastically. And probably I would say about 3 years ago, two and a half years ago, I started to really hone into the plot that as it currently is. And then last year I started working with my editor, where I really kind of like got down to the nitty gritty, and that was when my kind of it became what it is now.
And at a certain point you have to say okay and it's finished, because you can keep on revising. I think that's something people really don't understand either. It's like you never feel like it's fully complete, and sometimes you just think done. It's got to go now.
yeah. No, even when I was getting ready, to publish, like I made myself be like, no, if I'm gonna revise this, I mean, if I'm gonna like read it for proofreading, I'm not gonna revise it. I'm not gonna go back and be like, oh, this sentence is gonna be a little bit better if I do this,
Right. Self-control.
So,
so your book is it's set during World War I in the Middle East, actually, which is and I just had you write about this for an Ink It article, because I thought it was so interesting when you choose a period in history that's a little less well known.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you decided on that time period? Like what was your connection to it, or just your interest in it? And then how did you do some of your original, your initial research to kind of get a sense of place and time?
So I started with actually the Great War in Africa overall. And to begin with, actually, the side that I started researching was the German side, because there was a very famous a general who was the last one to kind of lay down arms and everything. And his journey was just fascinating, but it was lower. But then I started to become a little bit more interested in what was going on in the Middle East, because it really impacted the current global situation, in the Middle East, and actually the world, in terms of a lot of the politics that are constantly happening all started right then. And I didn't realize how much, that kind of had affected like the modern era. So I started reading into it, and I just became in love with it, because I was always kind of the type of person who loved like Indiana Jones, and the really big adventure stories from like, childhood, like The Mummy is one of my favorite, and I love that. I love Egypt. I love the Middle East. I love, all that stuff, and all those kind of like high flung adventures that kind of were very popular in the 80s and 90s that came out of that time period, I mean, that region. So I was like, you know what, this would be perfect, not only for my love of that time period and in terms of like the intrigue that happened, but also in terms of the setting, which is also highly fascinating to me. So I did that. That's how I settled on that. And then as far as the research goes, it was really a matter of primary sources that first started to get me into really what was going on in that time period. I found a lot of diaries and letters. The nurses' diaries were fascinating things that I was able to kind of tap into. There was a soldier who I started actually reading his entire digitized online journal. Then I found out it had been printed into a book, and that became like my favorite thing for reference. But that was the main stuff that I started with. And then obviously just reading a lot of books, history books about that time period as well.
Sure.
You know?
It's really it's just such an interesting time. And there were a few places where I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was a thing then, and I really learned things too. But of course it's a character driven story. I mean, you've got a great plot. There's a great mystery there. It's woven into the history, but your characters, and you said you've had these characters in your mind for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So where did they come from? How did they, where did they originate? And where were they born 20 years ago?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting one. I don't really even know. You hear like authors talk about, I think it's Diana Gabaldon, for instance, that these characters will kind of just whisper to her, and I don't know. I one day kind of had this vision of this nurse, who was in the Great War, and from the start, her name was Ginger, and she was a redhead, which to me was always just very funny because the British use that term for redheads, and and I loved. I don't know. I loved her, and then of course Noah, who is the love interest. I don't want to give away too much, but he also was just kind of one of these things. And I think it's funny because people will be like, oh, he reminds me of, little shades of like your husband. I'm like, it's funny because my husband, I met him actually when I was quite young, in 6th grade, but we didn't re-meet until well after I had started. So I'm like, Noah is not my husband.
I know, people ask me that all the time too. They're like, does your husband in your shoes? Like, bad habits, maybe. No, just
I know, right?
but little pieces of people, of course, but and then when you're looking to fill out a character, I find I'm watching other people for interesting habits or little things that I can add in to make fill them out. But all right, so let's get into you a little bit. You are a mom of 5, and I mean I have 4, so it's like I get it. That's that busyness. And we were talking a little before we went on air that you don't have to stop doing the thing that's you're passionate about and that is your dream when you're momming, but
right.
How do you manage it all? Or like top 3 tips for how you keep your life on track and your career on track while you're trying to balance things?
Well, I think first of all, I try to remember that I can't do everything. So I make a very big priority of what I really want. So in this case, writing has always been my favorite hobby. It's always been the thing that I enjoy doing the most. So if I have to make a choice between another hobby that I also really enjoy, because I really enjoy the arts, for instance, but if I have to make a choice between painting and writing, then I'm probably going to continue just doing the writing. I try to write. So that's the first thing, is just making sure that I choose my top priority, and that's the thing I focus on the most. So I might not watch as much binge television as other people do, but I do make it a priority to make the writing happen. The second thing is that I write all the time, and by that I don't mean that I'm constant, I have every day this is my writing goal and I have to do that. It's literally that whenever I can a chance to write, I write. So if it's at nighttime after the kids are asleep, I write then. If it's, you know, they're sitting down watching TV and I have a few minutes, I have my laptop open and I write something then. There have been times that I'm, you know, developing a new draft of a story or something, and I might have my cell phone out and dictate into my cell phone. So I write whenever I have an opportunity to write. And then the third thing is that I really nurture flexibility in my life. So I try not to overcommit to things, because I know that's a thing moms have a tendency to do, is like we say, hey, I want to do soccer,
Everything.
everything, you know, all the play dates and all that other stuff.
Right.
But I mean, with 5 kids, I can't really do that anyway. And I'm a very big fan of keeping my schedule as flexible to the things that really are important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very, very, and I try as much as possible to only commit to things that I absolutely think that I need to or want to commit to, because otherwise it just kind of makes it impossible for me to accomplish the things I want to. So
yeah, we were talking earlier about how I feel like I was more organized and more productive when the kids were actually younger, because you know, you had to do what you said you were going to do when you were going to do it, like, you know. um so yeah, I find it to be sort of an interesting thing that now that I'm a full-time writer, I actually probably produce less content. That's not true, but compared to the hours that I have to work, it's not, I don't think I'm as efficient anymore, which is interesting.
well, it's the let's hand it to the busiest person in the room thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
They'll get it done.
we'll get it done.
They'll get it done. All right. So release day, what did you do to celebrate today? Anything or?
Well, we might go out to dinner later, but I haven't done anything huge. I mean, I've just been, you know, posting on social. I made a quick video earlier for Instagram stories. I've been what's it called? My husband got me flowers, which is very nice. I plan to go on to Instagram live in a little bit, actually, because I was hosting a giveaway last week, and so I'm going to pull some names for the giveaway.
Right.
For some free audio books and paperbacks and stuff.
Yeah. All the fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So back to the story for just a second.
Sure.
Where you left it, it's a very satisfying, but I assume it's one of a series.
Yes.
Yay. Good. So do you have a sense of how, you know, I know when I wrote my first book, I thought it's one book, right? And I had this bigger story. And then as I got into it, I'm like, oh no, this is, you know, it's a typical 3-book, and it was sci-fi. So a typical 3-book arc.
Right.
Do you have a sense of how far you want to go with this, or is it, are you open to?
I'm open to it. I mean, originally, actually, I had planned a much longer series, and I have ideas for where I would like the story to go if that develops. I'm in the middle of working on the edit for the sequel, and in the middle of that, I decided I was actually going to divide the book into 2 books.
As one does sometimes.
So that would make it a very neat little trilogy. And I don't know. I mean, if I get to the end of the 3rd book at that point and say, hey, you know what, I think that's where it needs to end for now, then I might do that. It doesn't mean I wouldn't be open to writing more in the future, but splitting it into 2, I think would make it a really nice little trilogy. So so we'll see. I mean, I definitely, I love these characters, so I don't mind continuing with them. You know,
I know. I worked in my one world for my sci-fi book for almost 6 years.
Oh, wow.
You know, well, you know, from obviously the ideas, like you, I had an idea for a long time, and by the time I was working in that world, and I remember that letting, you know, the last saying the last word of the last book, and I, wow, I'm leaving them behind, and it was such a strange, bittersweet feeling, because you've been with them for so long, and you know, and yet you know when you reach the end. And I don't love when people overwrite, when you feel like it feels complete, and then somebody, you know, it's either making money or whatever, and they get compelled to keep going. And I don't, you know, I don't love that. But at the same time, you're like, but I love these characters. You could pick 10 books and I will read them all.
Well, and that's why I think, you know, you end up with all these people who will continue writing, you know, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy over and over again because they love the
I
characters so
love the
much.
characters.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yep, yep. But it was a really wonderful, and I noticed that each, just from a writing craft standpoint, I can tell how much effort you put into really making this story. There's nothing wasted in there. That is one thing. There's no pages where you're like, that the info dump piece. You really did a great job of every chapter has the, the moment, and then, the moving to the next thing, and the deeper development and the mystery. And so it was an enjoyable, I loved the characters. I loved the time period because it's something I didn't really have a lot of experience with in history class myself, or from what I know. So I learned things, but I also was just like, the experience of reading it was sometimes I had to put it down. I'm like, I feel stressed now. I hope she's okay. And it was that really good, it had that thriller edge to it, for a historical romantic suspense kind of a story. And that's an art form to really get that right and to keep people turning the pages. So congratulations, you did that really well. And so you're working on the edits for this next one now. So do you have a soft timeline?
I do. I have a soft timeline. Initially, I was aiming for spring of 2022, but I think it probably will be early September, if I'm being realistic.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort.
But we'll see, but yeah, I think just based off of the fact that I'm kind of decided to split the books, and I want to make sure that I do the second book justice. But that's what I'm aiming for. It will be 2022 for sure. But I'm not sure right now. That's why I actually was gonna put a pre-order date up, and I was like, I can't commit to it.
Yeah, sometimes it's a double-edged sword, right? You put that date up, and then you're like, well, I could just keep going if I don't have a date, But then on the other hand, I get to a certain point where I feel ready to put that date up, even though I'm not finished. Like I get a certain amount through, and I can see the ending in sight, and then I'll be like, now I just have to get it done. So the date is my helper instead of my stressor. This book cover art is beautiful. Who did your book cover art, and how did you?
Patrick Knowles design. He is actually, it's funny, almost all of the people that I worked with for my book were British.
Mine too. So funny.
So, I mean, I love them. They're great. And of course, my main character is British, so it all just comes together. I'm the American that's like working on this British project, apparently.
Yeah.
He's I found him through Reedsy, and he's just fabulous. He's designed some amazing stuff. He does some incredible hand lettering too. And then the photograph actually from it was from Richard Jenkins Photography, and he's one of the major photographers for book covers, which I didn't realize was a thing, but his work is just incredible. So it's fun,
Yeah, it's a great cover. It's a beautiful cover. The book itself it's just a beautiful, everything about it. That's important to me as both a reader. If I'm not reading it on my Kindle, it's important to me as a reader, and it's important to me as an author that that it represents the effort you put in. People can tell from the cover that it did, that it did. So it's quite lovely. So you were indie, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So and I did for some of my things that as well. It's a lot of work, right?
It is so much work. It is so much more work than I thought it would be. Because there's, I think, that side of indie where you still have people think that you're just, kind of going, oh, click, and I'm going to load it on, and there you go. For me, it was actually quite a decision to come to the indie process, but I was overwhelmed by doing it because of knowing that, as a mom, my time is limited.
Right.
But it is a lot of work, and it's kind of finding a way to be all the things that you have to be, being your own marketer, being your own publicist, being your own, proofreader. Well, not all the things, obviously
right.
I use editors and all that other stuff, copy editors, but but there's a lot of jobs that you have to juggle, and then it's kind of like you're the executive producer. So.
Yes, as well as the creative talent, right? So what was your favorite thing about doing the indie process, and what was your biggest challenge?
My favorite thing about doing the indie process was the creative control. And I think that that's probably what a lot of people do. It's part of the reason that I decided to go indie, was just because I knew that I wanted it to be a series, and I wanted to be able to have certain things my way. And I'm just a little bit controlling like that. So there's that.
You get a lot done. That's what we're going to say. You're very productive, not control, productive. And
so I just liked, the creative control was just wonderful.
yeah.
The thing that on the flip side that was very difficult was finding the right community. And I did find it, which was great. But I think that going from an idea of, okay, well, I'm going to have this kind of community that's going to be supporting me because they're going to be working with me in tandem, or they're going to be heading this up, to saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this. Where do I start? Who do I ask? What questions? I have all these questions, and I don't know what to do. And I found that the indie community is extremely, extremely supportive of each other, and that is one of the lovely things about it. Personally, I got into the Wide for the Wind group, and that kind of was just fabulous, because the people there just are so knowledgeable about publishing, and that really helped me. But and then obviously other authors. There's some other authors that I connected through Instagram, because I'm on there all the time.
Right.
But that was hard. It was hard feeling alone, because it's like, okay, I don't know what to do.
Right. Is there a right answer? And it's just not having that industry professional who's got like in the agent or whatever, and it's a different process when you're working yourself. And again, I would identify the exact same thing, the control that you have, especially if you have a vision for a project. Some of the things I've written, I've been like, and if somebody would like to take that and run with it in a different direction, I'm willing to do that work. But some things you have such a clear vision for how you want it, and that we have the choice to do it that way now. So but it's a lot. And for me now, I'm kind of like, I just can't manage every piece. I just need help. And so to have, either you have to pay for it, or you have, you go traditionally and you have someone there that's doing it with you. But cool. What do you read for fun?
Oh gosh, I actually read really wide.
I do too.
I love reading all sorts of things. So lately I've been doing a lot of women's fiction. But I have really, I love nonfiction. I love, reading a lot of rom-coms. I read everything. There's a horror writer in my critique group, and I would have told you before that I would never have been interested in horror, but he's really made me interested in the genre also. And I'll read YA, or I'll read middle grade. I just love it all. So
if it's a good story, I feel the same way. I'm like, I'm just interested in a good story. And, obviously there's styles and things that you don't jive with, but, or vibe with, but mostly I read wide as well. I was just curious if you had like a go-to genre that you
I will read a lot of historical fiction just to see what's going on in the genre. I think right now, there's a lot of dual point of view. World War II is having a moment right now in historical fiction. So, it's a little bit different from what I do, and but it is good for me to kind of dip into and see what's going in in the genre. But I do read a lot of it. But I because I love literature, I anything that you give me, if it's good, I'm happy to read it.
Yeah, me too. And that's why I love doing Book Club Babble so much, because I get handed books that are, things I might not ever pick up, but I'm like, wow, I really learned something, or that writer really had a great voice, or, and sometimes, and I've had the ability to showcase some indies that are really good, and give a platform for that. So that's super fun. I like to read wide as well. Now, one last thing, you were a photographer in your last life. So was it a hard thing to give up? Was it a natural, like you were talking about, you just need to put writing at the top of the list? Is that what sort of led you from that to this?
So photography is still one of my
and
top.
You're very good at it. Your Instagram is beautiful.
Thank you. I was doing, it was funny because it's going to sound terrible, but I wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to be a writer. I went to Hopkins from writing, and as I was getting ready to finish my master's, I went to the career counselor there, and she was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" You know, because I'm an ENFP, and we have the unfortunate habit with Myers-Briggs of getting very easily bored. And I said, I just don't really know. And she was like, "Well, of course, that's your personality type." She's like, "But I'm going to give you a plan, an idea. Make a 5-year plan, but at the same time, make a long-term plan. So writing is your long-term plan. What can you do for 5 years that you'll be happy doing?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll do photography." So I started doing photography, and it actually ended up being a lot more successful than I thought it would be. um, and it just took off, and I was really doing a lot of weddings, and I was doing about 40 weddings a year. And the downside of that was that, unfortunately, it means, all your weekends are taken up. You're doing editing all hours of the day. You're doing, engagement shoots and business meetings in the evenings. And then, of course, I started a family. So between family and, wanting to be there for my kids and wanting to be there on the weekends for my kids and missing, birthday parties and missing family things. And then also not giving me any time to do what my long-term plan had been, which was really to be a writer. I scaled back, and the more I scaled back, the more I was like, well, I think I need to continue to scale back a little bit further. So finally I was like, this is a good time to make my exit. I'm still doing, I enjoy doing pictures, with my family and whatnot. And I'm going to be doing some food stuff just to kind of keep a portfolio active. But yeah, it was time for me to say I'm done with the professional side of things and just
Yeah, I understand. It's good to know when it's completed. It's useful life for you, right? All right. Well, Annabelle, thank you so much. I feel like I was so excited to tell you how much I loved the book and to tell the world how much I loved the book. So this recording will be featured on our Book Club Babble site as soon as I download and edit it a little bit. And then we'll have hopefully a nice written interview from that we'll post there as well. But good luck with your rest of your release day and with this book and with all the other books. And I know I will speak to you soon. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on.